Hi, my name's Ronslee and I live in Coolum Beach in Queensland. And I feel I really need to tell my story of about a journey I've had of God's love and faithfulness and trustworthiness. So my story begins in 1997. I had a back operation and I felt God gave me the story of Joseph and the 12 brothers. And it just came over me and I thought, Lord, it's a great story, but I'm not quite sure about the pit and the prison part of that story. But God said that this was going to be relevant for my life. So then in 2003, I felt compelled to learn Psalm 91 and to learn it off by heart. And it took me 9 months to learn it. And it was all about resting, trusting, and God's protection. So by the October of that year, on my daughter's 21st birthday, I thought I tore a muscle in my arm, but it didn't go away, and I eventually had to have it scanned and have lots of tests on it, and the x-rays told me and said that the bone is actually being eaten away, and they didn't know really why. So it took them months of testing, and they eventually found out at the beginning of the following year, 2004, that it was a very rare osteolymphoma. So when I knew that it was cancer, I reflected back on that story of Joseph, and I thought, God, I hope this is the prison time and not the pit time. So then my daughter Rochelle and I were talking about Luke chapter 8, where Jesus and his disciples were in the boat, and there was this storm. But in the boat, Jesus was just resting, and they couldn't work out, why is he just resting? And then he eventually calmed that storm down. But what Jesus said to them first was, we're going to get into that boat, and we are going to get to the other side. So we weren't focusing on the storm part, but coming through and getting through that storm and getting to the other side. So then Rochelle wrote a song, which you can hear later. And I just developed this amazing peace that passes all understanding. And when I learnt Psalm 91, I realised that God had given me that for a purpose to learn. Because it took me a long time and it was just sinking in, and I thought, God, if this is true, I have to believe this for whatever is coming. So first of all, I resisted chemotherapy. I knew that God was going to heal me. He'd given me so much assurance that I was going to come through this. But I resisted. I thought, no, God's going to heal me. He's been telling me I'm going to come through it. So I didn't want to put that poison in my body. But then, as I was at school, as I was a teacher, over 2 days, God just gently spoke to me, and all the promises, all the things he'd been saying to me, all started to make me feel at peace. That God was actually telling me, your pathway to healing is going to be through having chemotherapy. And I had this amazing, amazing peace about this was the way I was meant to go. So then later, down the track, I developed a couple of lumps under my arm, and they had to test them to see whether the lymphoma was to do with those lumps as well. But before I went into hospital to have that lump removed and tested, I thought, I'm just going to pick up a tape that I'd been listening to all year, and I just happened to pick it up. It was about faith. So I took my little tiny tape recorder, just picked it up, and I'd been waking up singing this song, God Will Make a Way Where There Seems to Be No Way. But I didn't realise that when I was in that waiting room and waiting, I played that tape, and I could not believe that I'd put it in the right side, and it was cued at the last song on that tape, and it happened to be the song God Will Make a Way Where There Seems to Be No Way. So I knew that God was there in control, and he was guiding and leading me and giving me reassurance. So then after that, I was home and I thought, God, are you sure you want me to go with chemotherapy? Because I want to be really, really sure about this. And then I was sitting in the lounge and Daniel came into my mind. Daniel, and God gave me the chapter, which was chapter 6, and he said verse 16. So I thought, well, I better look it up and see what it says. And this is what it said to me. So the king gave the order, and they brought Daniel and threw him into the lion's den. The king said to Daniel, "May your God, whom you serve, continually rescue you." And I just felt God was saying, I'm going to allow you to go into an unsafe place, but I will protect you while you're there. Just time and time again, he reassured me. And then I went and had a look at another text that was on a calendar just to see what it said. And there it was, Daniel chapter 6, verse 27, which says, "He rescues and he saves. He performs signs and wonders. In the heavens and on the earth, he has rescued Daniel from the power of the lions." So God reassured me again. But again, I said, well, God, that was the Old Testament. Can you show me something in the New Testament? And so came into my mind to look up Acts chapter 16. I still didn't know what that was about. And as I read through that whole chapter, I then came to the verse that talked about Paul and Silas being in prison. And they were praying and singing hymns to God. And then suddenly there was this sudden violent earthquake, and the foundations of the prison were shaken. And at once all the prison doors flew open, and everybody's chains came off. Well, they didn't escape, but they were able to be taken out later. And once again, God was reassuring me that I was going to come through this time. And with the story of Joseph, I realised that the prison or the pit, I didn't know at that stage, was going to be relevant for me. So I went through with the chemo, and when it started, it just so happened to be on the Jewish Passover. So I felt God saying to me then that death is going to pass you by, because when the blood of the Lamb was painted over the door frames, and with Jesus' death, that his blood would be covering me and I would come through it once again. So after I had the chemotherapy, I then went and had radiotherapy on my arm, and as I was in the room, again God reassured me, and while I was in there alone, I felt as if, because of the fire that reminded me of the story of Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego, and how they were thrown into the pit of fire. So I actually had 3 tattoos on my arm, so they knew where to do the radiotherapy. So I named them Shadrach, Meshach and Abednego. So God just reassured me over and over again. Now this time, all that major treatment finished on my birthday in July. So then, part way through all the treatment, though it's at one stage, I remember sitting on the side of the bed and thinking, God, I don't know whether I can keep going through this, because, having chemotherapy and radiation is pretty hard going. But God gave me this vision, and I saw myself, the Red Sea was parted, and I could see myself then with Jesus, and he was holding on to my hand, and he just took my hand, and he was dressed in blue and I was in white. And I remember him turning around and saying to me, hold on, we're going to get to the other side. And every time I felt down at all, I would go back to that vision and that picture that Jesus gave me. So then there was another I was journaling all my whole story, and I was reading this devotional, and I was copying out this devotion page that I had that day, and I didn't look at the screen. And then when I looked up, I saw that there were these whole sentence in capital letters. I didn't know I'd done that. And it said, I am with you, and I will bless you, I will take care of you, and I'll control everything that's going to happen to you. So I realised then that that was coming to the end of that treatment, and I still didn't know. Hopefully that was the prison time. But 4 years later exactly, the Non Hodgkin's lymphoma came back all through the trunk of my body, which was a lot more aggressive than it was 4 years previously. And then again, I was quite at peace about going through with chemotherapy. And that chemotherapy happened to start again on the Jewish Passover. And I just felt again, God, you're speaking to me that I'm going to come through this. And this time I had to have stem cell transplant where they harvested all my stem cells. So along with the chemotherapy and radiotherapy and everything else that went with it, I then felt God was still saying to me that part of the healing, He gave me clear directions that I was to change my lifestyle, my diet, and to take certain supplements. So that was all part of my healing as well. And the biggest thing that I did as far as my diet's concerned is I cut out sugar 100%, knowing that it feeds cancer cells. So I lost that addiction for sugar, which I did have. And at the end of that, that season of all that treatment, again, it happened on my birthday, the end of the major treatment. So I knew that God was with me all the way through. But through that second cancer, God was a lot quieter. But I just believe that He was saying through the first cancer, God had reassured me so much that He didn't need to bombard me with all this reassurance, because I'd learned to trust Him and to know that I was going to come through for His glory and for His purposes. So I became to the point that I was very thankful for the journey that God had allowed me to go through. And I'm so thankful for my husband Andrew, for my family, for my friends, for all their amazing prayer for me and support through all my journeys. And I just believe if someone's out there, that if you're going through a storm, put your trust in Jesus. Allow the Holy Spirit to guide you no matter what the outcome, and know that we can trust God no matter what. And so I just want to say, to God be the glory, for He has done great things. Thank you.
We're called to follow Jesus' example. And when the disciples and Jesus stepped into that boat, Jesus knew there was going to be a storm, but He went to sleep. He knew they'd get to the other side. He'd promised that to His disciples. I believe as a follower of Jesus, we need to follow His example. And when the storms and the waves are crashing around us, and the wind's a big gale, and our natural instinct is to be terrified, it's a time for sleeping, for resting, for trusting completely that our Saviour Jesus, that His words are true, and He will take us to the other side. Good night, it's time for sleeping. Close your weary eyes. Good night, it's time for resting through the darkest night. Because Jesus said, don't be afraid. I will never leave you